Hello Grandmasters, it's Mike from the WCA. We're taking a look at our Week 6 video. This is a game, or at least part of the instruction is from a game played between Ben and Andrew, who are two students from our 2 o'clock class. And we like to have the students who play in tournaments in class the next day, because what happens is not only do we get to figure out what the players were thinking, but we also learn about the tournament conditions. We learn about special situations that come up. Over the last couple of tournaments that were played at the WCA, we got a lot of feedback from the students, and most of it positive. You know, we talk about the value of notation. We had a young lady who lost her first 2 games in one of the tournaments, but came back and won her last 2, actually gaining rating points. So it gives us a chance to discuss the ability to come back from a bad start. We had a couple of kids who played with a cold, and that's important because, you know, there are going to be times when you have to go to school, take a test, do anything important when you don't feel well. And playing chess is no different. It's very difficult to play chess when you're not feeling well, but, you know, kind of sticking it out and going there and playing is important, because it shows that you're tough and that you're willing to play when you're not at your best, which is important to do. It really is. We also hear things about touch move disputes, problems with kids maybe not behaving well at the board. Questions come up, you know, what happens if my opponent doesn't want to shake hands? So the fact that you guys are out there playing, and then, you know, we get a chance to work with you the very next day or the next week, it gives us a great opportunity to kind of tie up all these loose ends, because a lot of that information is hard to get out of a book or a piece of software. Most of the books are based only on instruction, and they don't deal too much with how to handle yourself at the board and some of the psychological tricks that can help you perform better and just feel better while you're playing. Okay, so anyway, we're going to take a look at the game first here. Andrew has the white pieces and Ben has black, and it begins as a simple 4 knights opening. And like so many players with white who are not familiar with this setup, they put the bishop on c4, thinking it's a great developing square for the bishop, which it is in most cases. But here it allows black to play the famous center fork trick. So at first sight, by taking at e4, it looks like a blunder because you're giving up a piece for a pawn, but it's really not at all. What happens is, when white accepts the knight, black gets the piece back right away with something called a center fork trick. So this pawn here that I'm circling just comes to the middle and forks 2 pieces. So no matter what white does, if you move the knight, they'll take the bishop. If you move the bishop, they'll take the knight. They're going to get their piece back. So the main line here, the most common way to play once this fork happens, is to put the bishop on d3. Black has to recover their piece, and then white will take the pawn back. So here, the position, if you put this on a computer or if you asked a strong master, they would say that the position is fairly balanced or equal. But as black, to come out of the opening and to be equal already is something of an accomplishment. Now, why is it equal, or what's in this for black? You know, why go in for this center fork trick if you're just trading things equally? Well, the key is for black, and I'll highlight it for you, is this pawn on e5. And you'll notice that all of white's pawns are still on the 2nd rank. They haven't moved yet. And as we've discussed many times at the WCA, your space, or the room that you have to maneuver your pieces, is always determined by the pawns. So for example, here you have a pawn out 2 squares. So this pawn is on black's 4th rank. And again, please ignore these numbers on the side. They're only for notation purposes. From white's perspective, this pawn is on the 5th rank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And from black's perspective, it's on the 4th. You can see that here. That pawn being out 2 squares opens up all these squares behind it for black to use. White can't use these squares. So in this position, black has more space. To get space, or to equalize space in the center, White would have to push this pawn to d4 or to c4. You'd have to put a pawn on the fourth rank, but it's really the center pawns that give you the most space because, again, a pawn out in the middle, you have room to the left and to the right. So clearly having a pawn in the middle of the board is an advantage. White is going to have a hard time getting this pawn to d4. As the highlights show you, there are already 3 black pieces that control that square. So just from this very simple position, black is going to keep some space in the middle. So there's the center fork trick. So it appears Andrew didn't know the idea, and Ben, ironically, has played the center fork trick a ton of times in his short career. We call him the king of the center fork tricks. So he didn't miss it. It turns out that Andrew really got confused in this position, and he blundered right away. He just moved his bishop away, and he lost the game quickly. And I'll show it to you in a second. However, let's go back to this position here. When you have the knight taking back on e4, a lot of players who see the center fork trick for the first time, they'll back this position up one move and say, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to take this knight here, and they're going to take me back, and then at some point they're going to play d5, and they're going to get my bishop. Well, if they're going to get one of my pieces anyway, and I already have one of their pawns, why can't I play this move, bishop takes f7 check, which seems to be a great move. I'm going to lose one of my pieces anyway, and I'm going to get one of their pawns, so why not take the pawn near the king and get out of this way? The problem with this move is when you take on f7, the king will take. Now you get your piece back. Black plays d5, attacking the knight, so the material is equal. It's the same exact material balance we had a moment ago. You traded one minor piece and one pawn. The problem here for white is it looks like this check is the best move for your knight. Black has this amazing move, king g8. And it looks kind of bizarre to tuck your king into the board like that. And most players who know this position, and it's very well known, will say that black is actually better now than they were in the normal center fork setup. And the reason for that is these minor pieces, especially these two knights, are going to get misplaced, especially this guy here on g5. So one way for white to play is to try to open the board up and take advantage of maybe this king being exposed here, but black doesn't have to do that so quickly. They don't have to give in to white. They can play h6, which is an important move. It not only knocks this knight back to h3, but it gives the king the h7 square. And that diagonal, it turns out, is a pretty safe place for the king, especially since the light square bishop for white has been removed from the game. And then from here, a couple of master games went bishop to g4, and this position is pretty good for black. You can check it for yourself. Black's going to have no trouble completing their development. This bishop will find a nice home at some point. At the right moment, you can tuck your king in here to h7, and this diagonal can be closed at any moment with the move e4, and black has a really comfortable game. So let's go back here. From this position, guys, keep it in your mind. You have a 4-knight setup that this bishop most commonly goes to b5, avoiding the center fork trick. It's very, very important that you know that. Another trick that comes up all the time. So here is where the center fork trick works. Let's add a couple of moves here. Let's say black plays the move bishop to c5 and white castles. And in this position, if you tried the center fork trick, you're going to get in trouble, because when the knight is captured, you'll see that this knight is attacking another black piece, and you're going to end up losing something here. It's really, really bad. But the main time that the center fork trick is played is in this position. The 4 knights have been developed, and there's a lone bishop. There's no black bishop on the board. There's only one side, because remember, this trick can work for the other side as well. This bishop here is the guy that allows white to play, that allows black to play the center fork trick. So in the game, Ben took, Andrew took, and then after d5, Andrew blunders here. Again, he should play bishop d3, let Ben take back, so now the material's equal, and they have a chess game to play. Instead, after d5, he played bishop to b3, which was a really bad move because when Ben takes the knight, there's no way to recapture this pawn. That's number one. And number two, this knight doesn't have any good square to go to. It actually had to retreat back to its home square. So he's not only down a pawn, but he's going to fall behind in development. And this little cluster of pawns in the middle for black are very, very powerful because they're taking away so many squares from the white pieces. Now here Ben found a really cool move, and if you put this on a computer, a lot of computers would like this move too. And it's not a move you would play in the opening, but Ben finds the move queen g5, which is really strong because it's hitting this pawn down here on g2, and it's not an easy pawn to defend. We discussed this position in class, and we all admitted that Andrew's position is not pleasant for white, but we found the move king f1. And sometimes, guys, please remember this, when your position is bad, occasionally you're going to have to play a move like king f1. That'll protect your pawn, and you have chances because there are still a lot of pieces on the board. When you get stronger at chess and you start playing at the expert and master level, this particular position is going to be won almost all the time by black. But at the scholastic level, please don't give up just because you're down material. Always continue and play these positions out. After king f1, white is in trouble, but white still has a queen on the board, both rooks, 3 minor pieces. You never know, there could be a chance. You'll see that the bishop here on c1 is lined up with the black queen. You may have some tactics by opening up in the center. So a move like that could at least keep you in the game for a while. It definitely, play it out. Some kids discussed here the way to protect this pawn by just moving it to g3. You can do that, but you'll see these light squares that have all been weakened by this move g3, and normally when you have a bishop on f1, that bishop kind of patrols these squares and covers them up, and you can just fianchetto the bishop and work on that diagonal. But where is this guy? He's way over here on b3, so these light squares are really, really weak. So moves like bishop g4 come to mind, right away taking over those squares. And I just want to show you a cute trick. Let's say white tries to develop with a move like knight e2, and then you play knight d4. You attack the pin piece, which is something all of you guys should know. You have a pin piece, just put some more pressure on it, and then say white tries to defend the knight with bishop c4, they're actually going to get mated. Yeah, it's mate in 2. So if you need to stop your video, you can. And it's simply knight f3 check, king f1, and bishop h3. And you can see the damage that these pawns put into the position by weakening all those light squares. Okay, so after Ben's queen g5, Andrew, to his credit, just said, you know what, I'll just give up another pawn to get my pieces out, and he played knight e2. So Ben took on g2, that attacked the rook. And a very common pattern here, rook g1 protected by this knight. This kind of setup is much better when the knight is on f3 safely, because then it also protects this h-pawn. So here in this position, after rook g1, you are gaining a tempo on Ben's queen, but he gets to take another pawn. And when we showed this, one of the students brought up a concept or an idea that she had remembered from another either lecture or one of her own games, I'm not sure which, but she said that she had learned it's dangerous for the black queen or any queen to go into enemy territory like this and grab pawns on the second rank in the opening. And she's making a very, very good observation. It's a very good point. But there's a big difference in this position. What I want to do is I want you to compare this position for a moment, and we'll come back to it, but I want to look at here this position. And here, very similar. You'll see that it's the black queen also here on the second rank, but this time on the queen side. And she did in fact come into this square to grab a pawn. She grabbed the b pawn. But you'll notice there's a huge difference in this position, that here white is ready to castle in one move, and that king will be completely surrounded by pawns, very safe. Every minor piece for white has been developed, and after castling, there is the danger that the black queen could get trapped on this side of the board. This is a well-known position from the Tory attack. Let me show it to you from the opening, just real quick. So d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop g5, c5, attacking the middle. White protects the pawn and develops the light squared bishop here, and then queen b6, which is a common maneuver when your opponent develops a bishop on this side of the board. That leaves the knight's pawn on the same side of the board vulnerable or loose. It's just not protected. So one way to play is to go after that pawn. White could protect it, but in this line they may choose to play knight to d2, which protects the pawn. I'm sorry, it doesn't protect the pawn, but it opens a square for the rook, so that after queen takes b2, you can just develop bishop to d3, and then the line I showed you was queen to d5 here. And in this position, I'm sorry, pawn to d5. In this position, you'll see the queen again on your side of the board, but every one of your pieces is working in the game. Every one of them. Rook to b1 could come at some point and grab that pawn if this bishop ever moves. You have ideas like bishop takes knight, pawn takes, followed by either c4 or d5, completely opening up the game. And you can castle at any moment, connecting your rooks at some point, and white gets a ton of compensation for that pawn. So here, if we go back to the position with Ben, look at the black queen now. She's in a similar spot, right? She's on white's side of the board on the second rank, but there's a huge difference. This rook is an active piece, but it's only on the board because there's a knight here on e2. If that knight's not here, the queen's going to take the rook in one go, right? So you can make the argument that right now the knight can't move. Well, if the knight can't move, the queen's not getting out anytime soon. This bishop can move if you move one of these two pawns. Well, this guy here can't move because the bishop here is trapped, blocking it. And if you move the middle pawn, then black has an option to start taking pawns and opening up the game. So white is really tied up here. So there's a big, big difference. So it turns out that Ben can get away with snatching those pawns. All right, so the game. D3 was played, trying to open up the game, and in this position, Ben decided to take the pawn. But I want you to go back for a minute and recall the comment we made. The rook is basically on the board because the knight on e2 is protecting it. So instead of taking the pawn on d3 here, can you find another move for black that might put some more pressure on white's position? Okay, if you spent some time, you may have come up with the move knight d4, which is a really powerful move. Now, you can get out of this by lifting your rook up, and now you'll have a pawn protecting it, but knight f3 check will pretty much force white to give up this rook for the knight, because if you don't take it and you move your king, for example, to f1, well, here comes trouble again on those light squares. Check. How do you get out? You have to take with the rook, and then you get mated. So just an example of what could have happened. So knight d4 here looked like a really strong move. So after d3, Ben just took, and Andrew took back with the queen. Now, if you run this game on a computer, and I'll caution you guys, you're going to get something like, +3 or +4. You'll see a computer saying that, black is completely winning because they're up this material. But I want to remind you who's playing this game. We're not masters. We're just, young players in tournaments, and we're doing our best to improve. White is not lost at that level. The position is not pleasant, but you'll notice what happened after those trades. This comparison with the queen now on d3, you see this bishop on c1 is ready to develop, and if this bishop develops, white could castle queenside, connecting the rooks, and at least every piece they have left on the board would be in the game, right? Again, let's compare that to this position, which was the first comparison we did, and you'll see that the white pieces are completely tied up. So to Andrew's credit, by making this break and getting this exchange to happen, he definitely got some real play. So in the game, Ben developed with bishop to c5, and I think that bishop should have immediately been challenged with the move bishop to e3. And again, don't treat this video as just a recap of a game that was played. Use it as a chess lesson. You can watch it more than once and get something new out of it every time. If you get this position in one of your games, it's very common. I mean, this bishop is not protected here, right? So, you know, it is extremely likely that a player rated 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,200, they're going to make this trade, and you take back with your queen, and they're happy with these trades, thinking, well, you know, I'm up, what are they up? 3 pawns here, I think, right? Yeah, so I'm up 3 pawns, so these trades have to be good for me. And, you know, now I can just develop my bishop to this nice square, and I'm up 3 pawns. Well, what if white castles queenside? If you look at this position, you'll see that white is starting to get everything into the game, right? And let's just say that black castles kingside, which is a very logical thing to do, especially at their level. And then suddenly you get hit with the move rook h1. And the queen, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot of places to go. Where does she go? It's amazing how this game can turn around so quickly. Queen g2 is the only move to save the queen. And then a very sneaky move, knight g3. And knight g3 is designed to cover this square here. And how white got this is just amazing. You just get your pieces in the game, and that queen, if this rook comes here to g1, that queen is out of squares. So black would have to find a way here to either make a draw or figure out a way to get the queen out of trouble. So that's why please don't ever give up. You have a bad position, get the rest of your pieces in the game and look for tactics. The game is never over, so keep it up. Okay, so let's go back. Ben had just played bishop to c5, and again, bishop e3 would have been a very challenging move. Here, Andrew blunders. He finds a terrific idea, and the idea is this bishop is not protected, and he finds the move queen to d5, which threatens the bishop, and it also threatens the pawn on f7. It's a great idea. He missed that the bishop can take on f2 here. It's attacked twice by the king, by the queen, and the bishop up here. So whenever you get that idea, you know, occasionally you can take this pawn first, let the king come out to take your bishop, and then play queen d5 check, and then you get your bishop back here, and in that position you'll get one of your pawns back, and you'll also misplace the black king. What he did by playing queen d5 is he allows bishop takes f2 check. Queen f2 check would have been a lot stronger, and the reason for that is it would knock the king here to the d file, and then after a move like bishop e6, hitting the queen, just say she moves to e4, you can actually castle long with check. And this is the kind of position you can go over on your own, and you'll see that black is just all over white. There's so much pressure that king, they're going to have to give up a ton of material in this position and probably still get mated at the end. But anyway, Ben took on f2 with the bishop. Andrew played king f1. And amazingly enough, black loses the game in one move. But unfortunately, white didn't see the answer. Black here actually took the rook with the bishop, and when he did it, Andrew took back with the knight, and the game ended quickly after bishop e6, chasing the queen away. Black ended up being up too much material, and white lost the game. But let's go back. It's just absolutely amazing. After bishop takes, and we showed this to the whole class, and you know, several students got it after a while. After bishop takes g1, it's actually black who's getting mated. So you have a mate in 3 here. You can pause your video and hopefully you find it. And the mate in 3 begins with queen takes f7, check, king d8, an absolutely amazing move, bishop g5, game is over. Incredible, right? So this game was such a roller coaster ride. Please go over it more than once, and there are some very important concepts that are here. The center fork trick, what we call scholastic compensation. It means, if you're not a master and you're even down a whole piece, don't give up. You have to keep your pieces active. You'd be amazed at how much you can get out of it. Okay, so make sure you master that idea in the center fork trick before you come into class on Sunday. Okay, guys, we'll see you.